Hello, everyone. Before she was the First Lady of France, she was the face of Versace. Before she sang in smoky jazz clubs, she walked for Dior in silence. And before the world tried to define her, Carla Bruni had already rewritten her own story again and again. She was born into privilege, but never leaned on it. She was raised among artists, musicians, aristocrats. And yet, she chose to enter the most superficial industry in the world and turn it into art. On the catwalk, she was statuesque, untouchable, with that aristocratic cool and feline grace. She became the muse of an entire decade. But while the world stared, Carla watched back, calculating, curating, quietly preparing for something more. She wasn't just a supermodel, she was a chess player in heels. And then just as she reached the peak of fashion, she walked away. Not in disgrace, but in perfect control. Into music, into poetry, into power. How does a woman go from fashion icon to first lady? From object of desire to maker of headlines? This is not the story of a model who followed the rules. This is the story of a woman who rewrote them one identity at a time. Carla Bruni was born into a world of beauty, brilliance, and contradiction. Born in Turin, Italy. In 1967, she was the daughter of a concert pianist and an industrial magnate. But her real inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was culture, music, language, poise. Her mother was a legendary Italian soprano. Her home echoed with Chopin and Vivaldi, with dinners that included philosophers, painters, and political radicals. Carla grew up speaking multiple languages, attending elite schools, learning to analyze art before she ever wore eyeliner. But perfection has its weight. And for Carla, the pressure of brilliance came with silence. She wasn't the loudest in the room, she was the most observant. She watched how charm worked, how power moved. She understood early that elegance could be weaponized, that beauty, in the right hands, could become its own form of control. When she was 7, her family moved to France, fleeing political threats tied to her father's wealth. That displacement leaving behind her birthplace, her heritage would stay with her. It gave her a certain distance, a detachment that would later define her modeling gaze seductive, but never begging, present, but never owned. In school, Carla stood out, but not for trying. She was tall, intelligent, self-contained. While other girls mimicked trends, Carla read poetry. She preferred Baudelaire to Barbies. She wrote lyrics in secret. She already knew that the world would see her as a face. But inside, she was preparing a voice. By the time she reached her late teens, she made a decision that shocked her family. She wouldn't study literature or music. She would become a model, not out of desperation, but out of calculation. Fashion, to Carla, wasn't a dream. It was a platform, a stage, a way in. She understood that beauty opened doors, but once inside, she planned to speak. Carla Bruni entered fashion the way a queen enters a ballroom, not seeking approval, but owning the room by simply existing in it. She was just 19 when she signed with City Models in Paris. Her cheekbones were already famous among casting directors before her name was. Her presence calm, composed, slightly amused was a contrast to the eager intensity that filled every runway audition. From the beginning, she was different. She didn't audition with desperation. She studied the photographers. She observed the clients. She knew that every shoot was a negotiation, not a gift. And unlike most new faces, Carla knew exactly what she was giving and what she would never give away. Her breakout moment came in the late 1980s, walking for designers like Christian Dior and Givenchy. But it was her presence in haute couture circles that turned her into a muse. With her feline eyes, her cool demeanor, and her deliberate movements, she projected a kind of untouchable sensuality that designers couldn't replicate. She wasn't loud, she was cinematic. Her beauty didn't scream, it suggested, and that suggestion lingered longer than any shout. By 1990, she was being flown around the world for runway shows, photographed by Helmut Newton, and courted by fashion houses hungry for something more refined than the usual bombshells. Carla gave them intelligence in silhouette, confidence in silence. A woman who didn't need the clothes to speak for her because her stillness was already a statement. But unlike many of her peers, Carla never allowed herself to be consumed by the industry. She kept one foot in and one foot out, even at the height of her modeling fame. She never gave up her apartment filled with books, her notebooks of lyrics, or her late-night guitar playing. Modeling to Carla was always temporary, always a means to something more. And in every backstage corridor, every hotel suite, every whispered conversation with designers and stylists, she carried a quiet secret. She wasn't going to be a model forever. She was only getting started. By the early 1990s, Carla Bruni wasn't just a model. She was an archetype, the kind of woman designers built collections around, the kind of presence that elevated a campaign from commercial to iconic. She walked for Versace, Christian Dior, Givenchy, and Chanel. She became a fixture in the haute couture world not as a mannequin, but as a muse, one who never needed to chase the camera, because the camera always found her. When she entered a room, conversations shifted, not because she was loud, but because she was composed. The stillness, the intelligence behind her eyes, the slight curve of irony in her smile, Carla carried herself like someone who had seen through the game and decided to play it anyway, just better. Her face graced the covers of Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. Her walk on the runway was unhurried, deliberate, self-assured. She didn't sell the clothes. She made them part of her. Photographers adored her for her restraint. Helmut Newton once said she was a perfect mix of elegance and danger. She could wear a silk slip dress and make it look like armor. She wasn't just beautiful, she was strategic. She understood the politics of fashion long before most realized there were any. She knew when to be visible and when to vanish. While other supermodels became tabloid regulars, Carla remained an enigma. Rumors swirled about her relationships with rock stars, with billionaires, but she never confirmed, never denied. She kept her name in conversation without ever having to speak. Her silence was its own kind of publicity. She was always just out of reach, and that made her irresistible. At her peak, she was earning millions. She had the admiration of Gianni Versace, Karl Lagerfeld, and Yves Saint Laurent. She could have launched a perfume, a clothing line, a dynasty of fashion influence. But she didn't. Because even then, Carla was preparing to leave. She had conquered fashion not by playing into it, but by staying apart from it. And just as the world was beginning to label her a legend, she quietly pivoted. From muse to musician, most models try to hold on to youth, to relevance, to the industry that once crowned them. But Carla Bruni did the opposite. At the height of her fame, she let it go. No farewell tour, no final campaign, just silence, and then a song. In 1997, without fanfare, Carla stepped away from modeling and stepped into music, not as a celebrity playing dress-up in another art form, but as a true songwriter. She didn't hire a team to craft her image. She picked up a guitar, wrote lyrics on napkins, and sang with a voice that surprised everyone low, smoky, fragile, and undeniably hers. Her debut album, Quelqu'un m'a dit, Someone Told Me, released in 2002, wasn't just a success. It was a revelation. Critics expected novelty. They got intimacy. Audiences expected glamour. They got poetry. The model who once sold high fashion was now bearing her soul in French chansons, singing about love, loss, irony, and aging with disarming honesty. This wasn't rebranding, it was rebirth. Carla's defiance wasn't loud, it was precise. She walked away from a world that defined her by appearance and built another that valued her mind. She rejected the assumption that beauty must expire. She challenged the idea that women couldn't begin again at 30 or 40 or beyond. Her transition wasn't calculated for fame, it was carved from instinct. And while the fashion world whispered about her choices, Carla never looked back. She played small venues, wrote her own material, refused to trade authenticity for attention. In a culture addicted to reinvention, she simply revealed what had always been there beneath the surface: a writer, a thinker, a woman with something to say. Her career shift was more than a move, it was a message. You can be more than one thing. You can grow without explanation. And you can leave the room before it stops clapping. Carla Bruni didn't defy the system with rebellion, she outgrew it with grace. The woman who once whispered French ballads into microphones suddenly found herself standing beside a head of state. In 2007, Carla Bruni, former supermodel, now acclaimed singer-songwriter, began dating Nicolas Sarkozy, then president of France. Within months, they married, and the world turned its gaze once more. But this time, it wasn't admiration, it was scrutiny. Carla wasn't just a public figure anymore. She was now France's first lady. And with that came expectations: archaic, unforgiving, political, overnight. Her past was re-examined under a different lens. Old photo shoots, nude campaigns, former lovers, lyrics all resurfaced. The media, both French and international, devoured every detail. Her transformation from fashion muse to political spouse bewildered the press and divided the public. For someone who had always curated her image with precision, the sudden exposure was disorienting. The elegance remained, but the silence grew louder. Gone were the intimate interviews, the soft albums. In their place were press conferences, official visits, and carefully guarded statements. Carla Bruni, once the architect of her own narrative, was now being written by others. Supporters praised her for her composure, her ability to soften Sarkozy's often combative image. Critics accused her of abandoning artistry for status. She was no longer judged as a woman, but as a symbol. And symbols, by nature, are stripped of nuance. During her years as First Lady, Carla tried to balance both roles. She continued to write music, releasing an album in 2008. But the tone had changed: less confessional, more cautious. Her interviews became less philosophical, more diplomatic. The woman who once defied fashion and fame was now operating under protocol and pressure. And yet, even in this role, she remained unmistakably Carla, dignified, still watching, still choosing when to speak. But for many fans, it felt like something had been lost. The intimacy, the unpredictability, the rawness that once made her music feel like a whisper in the dark had faded beneath the noise of the global stage. Carla didn't fall from grace, she traded the stage for a podium. And in doing so, lost a part of herself the public had come to love most: her distance from power. The supermodel had become the symbol, and symbols don't always get to sing. Carla Bruni never belonged to one world. She passed through them: fashion, music, politics, with elegance and intention, like a woman refusing to be defined by any one moment. Her legacy is not a single image or song, but the quiet defiance of reinvention. She reminded us that you can leave the runway and still own the room, that beauty is fleeting, but intelligence echoes, that you can sing your truth, even in a whisper, and still be heard. For some, she is the model who walked for Versace. For others, the voice behind melancholic chansons. And to many, the First Lady who stood beside power but never disappeared into it. She left each stage before the applause ended. She never overstayed. She never explained. In a world obsessed with access, she gave us mystery. In an age of exposure, she gave us control. Carla Bruni didn't just live many lives, she chose them. And maybe the question isn't what she left behind. Maybe the question is, what part of herself did she never let us see?